This is the story of a locked cathedral door, an unprecedented constitutional blockade, and a queen who suddenly realized that her spoken demands mean nothing against the permanent ink of the heir to the throne. In less than 24 hours, Queen Camilla's quiet attempt to sanctify her own bloodline was destroyed by a single devastating piece of administrative paper. What Camilla just realized behind closed doors, as she stared at an official royal directive bearing Prince William's authorization, is that the ultimate power in the monarchy does not lie in proximity to the king, but in the ruthless, silent enforcement of protocol. This video will unpack the secret constitutional power grab she attempted within the most sacred spaces of the church. How the Prince of Wales uncovered her administrative manipulation, the unprecedented written retaliation that followed, and the devastating realization that she is completely powerless against the true guardians of the Windsor legacy. To understand the sheer magnitude of this written humiliation, we must first look at the empire Camilla believed she had, meticulously constructed right up until the moment it collapsed. For 30 years, she navigated the treacherous waters of palace politics, evolving from the ultimate royal outcast to the anointed Queen Consort. She weathered the bitter ghosts of the 1990s and slowly, methodically chipped away at the lingering legacy of Princess Diana. She survived the public outrage, operating with a relentless, calculated patience that eventually placed her at the absolute pinnacle of British society. Once she had the Archbishop of Canterbury's blessing and the spectacular crown upon her head, her confidence mutated into a dangerous sense of absolute entitlement. She felt she had King Charles completely managed. She began to elevate her non-royal children, pushing them into high society events, securing VIP access at state functions, and subtly testing the boundaries of the inner royal circle. She believed she had successfully bypassed the ancient rules of the bloodline, operating entirely above the consequences that governed the rest of the institution. But this illusion of absolute power required constant aggressive expansion to maintain its momentum. Having secured social and visual proximity to the throne, Camilla soon set her sights on the most heavily guarded, impenetrable fortress of the British state, which is the intersection of the crown and the church. The focal point of this new secret power grab was the ancient, deeply spiritual Royal Maundy service. This event is not a glittering state banquet, a charity gala, or a garden party. It is a highly sacred constitutional duty where the reigning monarch distributes alms to the elderly, representing the spiritual core of the sovereign's vow of service to the people. It is a ceremony strictly reserved for the monarch and occasionally the most senior working members of the royal bloodline. Utilizing her trusted private aides and attempting to bypass the standard ecclesiastic review process, Camilla initiated a quiet, calculated push to insert her daughter Laura Lopes into the official sovereign procession of the Maundy service. Her goal was a staggering exploitation of her current status. It was a deliberate attempt to sanctify the Parker Bowles bloodline, intertwining her non-royal family with the deepest, most permanent religious traditions of the state. She wanted the global public to see her daughter walking down the aisle of a historic cathedral, cloaked in the implicit authority of the crown's divine right. She assumed that by operating through the opaque bureaucracy of palace, faith advisors, and utilizing the sheer intimidating weight of her title, her actions would remain entirely undetected until it was too late to reverse them. She assumed wrong. The modern monarchy, fiercely protected by Prince William, and the iron-clad traditionalism of Princess Anne, operates with forensic, inescapable precision. William does not just monitor the financial ledgers of the Duchy of Cornwall, he acts as the ultimate, uncompromising guardian of the institutional boundary. During a routine high-level review of the ecclesiastical guest lists, cathedral seating arrangements, and high-security procession protocols, senior aides directly linked to the Prince of Wales flagged a glaring anomaly. The hidden paper trail exposed Camilla's discreet attempt to smuggle her daughter into a space reserved exclusively for the constitutional bloodline. To Prince William, This was not merely a breach of event etiquette or a simple misunderstanding of the guest list. It was a severe constitutional threat. It was a direct, calculated insult to the uncomplaining sacrifice of Princess Catherine, who has always respected the profound religious boundaries that Camilla was now actively trying to exploit. Catherine has spent years mastering the intricate religious duties of the firm without ever demanding center stage for her own family. Furthermore, for William, this aggressive maneuvering was a painful reminder of the backdoor manipulation that had caused his late mother, Princess Diana, so much agonizing paranoia decades ago. The intelligence quickly reached William's desk. The reaction was not a screaming match in the echoing corridors of Clarence House. It was an act of cold, silent, and absolute institutional execution. William did not leak tearful complaints to the press. He did not engage in a public war of words. He weaponized the administrative machinery of the state in a way Camilla had never anticipated, working in complete alignment with the highest levels of the royal household and the supreme authorities of the Church of England. William bypassed a simple verbal warning and instead orchestrated the issuance of a formal written directive. This was a devastating, unprecedented administrative weapon. It was an official edict, permanently entered into the historical archives of the palace, explicitly defining the boundaries of sovereign processions and strictly banning non-blood relatives from participating in core religious state duties. When Camilla's administrative office received the notification, it was not presented as a draft for discussion or a polite suggestion. It was an absolute iron-clad ban delivered with the full crushing weight of the institution. The realization hit Camilla with terrifying force as she held the physical document in her hands. The visual humiliation of her daughter being permanently and officially barred from the cathedral doors carried a devastating, deeper meaning. It proved that her title, her crown, and her influence over the king offered absolutely zero protection against the sovereign administrative authority that William now wields. The trap had entirely snapped shut. She was holding the physical, permanent proof that she does not own the institution. The era of her backstage manipulation was officially over, leaving her entirely exposed to the cold reality of her true position within the palace walls. Clutching the unprecedented written directive, Queen Camilla immediately bypassed her own staff and marched directly into King Charles's private study. She was carrying the physical proof of her own administrative humiliation, expecting the sovereign to share her profound moral outrage. For years, she had relied on Charles to act as her ultimate shield, the man who had defied his own mother, his nation, and the relentless British press to secure her place on the throne. She laid the document on his desk, demanding that he use his sovereign pen to instantly nullify his son's decree. She demanded a fierce reprimand of the Prince of Wales and the immediate reinstatement of her daughter into the sacred Maundy procession. She expected the king to unleash his absolute authority to protect the illusion of her supreme power. Instead, as King Charles read the formal edict, the atmosphere in the room shifted into a terrifying, suffocating silence. He did not reach for his pen. He did not summon his private secretary to draft an immediate countermand. He simply looked at the document, entirely aware of the inescapable constitutional trap his son had laid. This is the psychological climax of Camilla's 30-year campaign. Charles realized in that moment that William had not acted out of mere spite. He had aligned himself perfectly with the supreme authorities of the Church of England. The directive was not just a palace guest list update. It was a rigidly enforced ecclesiastical boundary. If Charles were to override a formal religious decree drafted to protect the sacred nature of the sovereign procession, he would trigger an unprecedented constitutional crisis between the crown and the church he is sworn to lead. Faced with the stark reality of choosing between the structural survival of his dynasty and the social ambitions of his wife, Charles chose the institution. His devastating silence was the ultimate domestic betrayal. That silence stripped away the velvet, ropes, and exposed the staggering commercial desperation hiding just beneath Camilla's royal titles. When you remove the deferential bows, the billion-dollar public relations machinery, and the historic tiaras, you uncover a brutal financial truth. Queen Camilla possesses absolutely zero sovereign wealth. She is a billionaire in optics, but entirely bankrupt in actual, untouchable institutional power. The sprawling, lucrative empire of the Duchy of Cornwall belongs exclusively to Prince William. The Duchy of Lancaster belongs strictly to the sovereign. The magnificent private estates of Sandringham and Balmoral, the fleets of state vehicles, and the priceless art collections are entirely outside her legal ownership. She is effectively an institutional tenant, operating on a high-end lease that will terminate the exact moment King Charles passes away. This terrifying lack of independent collateral is precisely what drove her to infiltrate the Royal Maundy service. She understands that when the current reign inevitably concludes, her structural influence drops to zero. She will become a dowager queen, entirely dependent on an allowance and a housing assignment dictated by King William V. Her frantic, quiet attempt to insert Laura Lopes into the deepest religious traditions of the state was a desperate scramble to secure permanent spiritual and social collateral for her bloodline. She wanted to weave her family so deeply into the constitutional fabric that they could never be removed. But by issuing a formal written ban, William permanently severed her ability to manufacture that legacy. He exposed the ticking clock that governs her every move, reminding her that without Charles's active protection, she holds absolutely no real cards. Standing flawlessly in this new rigid order is Princess Catherine, whose quiet, unyielding discipline provides a devastating contrast to Camilla's frantic administrative maneuvering. While the Queen Consort scrambles for legal loopholes and backroom deals to secure a future for her children, the Princess of Wales has spent over a decade mastering the very institution Camilla tried to exploit. Catherine does not need to sneak her family into cathedral processions. She does not need to demand access. Her power is absolute because it is legitimate earned through unyielding loyalty and personal sacrifice. William's aggressive written protection of the crown's religious boundaries is in essence an aggressive protection of Catherine's future court. He is ensuring that when his wife becomes queen, she will not have to share the constitutional stage with the remnants of the Parker Bowles ambition. Notice the subtle, profound shifts that have rippled through the palace since the ink dried on that directive. What looked like a single argument over a church service actually established an unbreakable legal precedent within the firm. The rules have suddenly become uncompromising. Access codes to certain administrative wings, once freely granted to Camilla's extended family, have been quietly revoked and placed under the direct written authorization of the Prince of Wales's office. Small symbolic changes are happening in plain sight. A portrait featuring Laura Lopes, once discreetly placed in a secondary drawing room at Clarence House, was quietly moved out of the public eye. When Camilla's inner circle arrives at official state functions now, they are politely but firmly redirected to the standard side door entry procedures reserved for non-working guests. That detail matters. It is the forensic proof of shifting power. The ghost of Princess Diana, which Camilla spent 30 years trying to erase, has not just survived. It has been inherited, protected, and quietly weaponized by a son who refuses to let the core identity of the Windsor family be diluted. Every time Catherine waves to the crowds, the 12-carat Ceylon sapphire engagement ring flashes in the light, serving as a permanent, undeniable reminder of the original Princess of Wales. William is steadily closing the doors, locking down the access points, and enforcing a strict, impenetrable boundary between the Windsor legacy and outside opportunists. Queen Camilla may still sit on the throne, projecting the image of a woman entirely at ease. But the absolute power she thought she wielded has been exposed as a mirage. The formal written directive was her ultimate institutional reckoning. It proved that in the high-stakes warfare of the British monarchy, the crown does not bend to manipulation, and the written word of the heir carries the devastating weight of the future. As the transition of power silently accelerates behind palace walls, the upcoming months will define the long-term survival of the monarchy. If you want to understand the real mechanisms of royal power, beyond the polished press releases and the tabloid noise, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below on how you think the institution will handle this permanent shift in protocol. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next breakdown.